Meet the KBD fans KBD67 Lite R2, what could potentially be the best beginner keyboard. In this video, I'll talk to you about what you get for this board for $110, walk you through my building process, give you a typing test, and overall just give you my thoughts and opinions on whether or not you should buy one. And of course, if you enjoy this build, please be sure to subscribe. I do plan on making more keyboard content in the future. Now let's get started. So let's start off by talking about what you're actually buying for $110. You're getting a 65% hot swap keyboard that pretty much comes with everything you need besides switches and keycaps. Even a carrying/storage case, which yes, probably does hike the price up and probably could be a lot cheaper without it, but I still think it's a nice touch. Now the components of the board itself are actually really nice, but it can vary which version you get, the wired or the Bluetooth. Personally, I would go for the wired version, mainly because the Bluetooth version, in my opinion, has a slightly worse PCB, and you also have to buy and attach the battery separately, which I'm not very experienced on and I'm not comfortable doing. So aside from the PCB, you're obviously getting a lot more components, such as the chassis for starters. It's a gasket mounted design, which does lead to more of a flexier, bouncier typing experience, which I'll get into more later. You get case foam that sits below the PCB, which in my opinion, it's pretty thin. You can probably replace it with something else, but it's nice to have included. I think you can get away with it. On top of the PCB, you also get a mute silicone material, which does act as a PCB foam. It's a really thick material, actually. It feels pretty nice. You also get an injection molding polycarbonate plate and screw-in stabilizers made by KBD fans themselves. And they come taken apart like Durox stabilizers, completely dry, so you can mod them straight out of the box yourself, which I think is a great addition. They said, screw it, we're not going to do a factory pre-loop job on them, because usually that does not turn out well. I appreciate it. So now that you know what all the parts are, let's talk about how easy it is to put them all together, because remember, this thing comes completely disassembled, meaning you have to start from the ground up. And in my experience, it is very simple to do. They have instructions on their website, and overall, it's just pretty much an easy process, as long as you follow the instructions. If you get your stabilizers right on the first try, this thing could probably take you anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half to fully build up. And also, something else important to note is that I never felt like there was anything wrong with the parts in this kit. For example, the GMMK Pro had a lot of PCB flex if you used aftermarket stabs and a polycarbonate plate. I never had something like that with this board, meaning I think it's very well manufactured. Now granted, I didn't use any aftermarket stabs on this board, so I can't tell you 100% sure, but I also didn't feel like I needed aftermarket stabs. I'll talk to you more about that after the typing test. But yeah, overall, I think the building process is extremely beginner friendly. As long as you follow the instructions, you should be fine. Now let's talk about my makeup of the board. So obviously for the switches, I went with milky cap Gateron yellows. I lubed them all with 205 grade 0 and 105 on the springs. I chose these switches mainly because a lot of people have Gateron yellows, so it also help you out on this typing test to understand what you're going to get at here. And this board is more cost friendly, and Gateron yellow is more cost friendly. You're probably going to see a lot of Gateron yellows on this board. So yeah, that's why I chose them. For the stabilizers, I used the added PCB foam that comes with the kit. It kind of acts as like a band-aid mod almost. I used 205 on the housings, and I put dielectric grease on the wires. The keycaps I chose kind of contradict that whole cost-friendly thing I had with the Gateron yellows. I went with Red Samurai. I think it looks amazing on this board, especially paired with the Final Mouse Starlight 12. Now yeah, I know that plus and minus on the right bottom row kind of looks awkward. I didn't have enough 1.25U keycaps to fit it, so here we are. If you tally up the price for everything, this whole entire build would cost about $230 before shipping and taxes. Now of course, if I went with something like a way more cost-effective keycap set, I could probably work that price down to $150, which $150 for this keyboard is looking like an amazing deal. But of course, there's one more thing I have to talk about, and that's how the typing actually all pans out. Now let's talk about this typing. So for the feeling of the typing, I thought it was good. It's not a stiff board, and I think the gasket mount was implemented well and has enough bounce, but not too much. I felt fine doing things like video editing and just playing video games in general. And typing, of course. The feeling of the stabilizer really just depends how talented you are with modding them, especially because they come bone dry out of the box. But overall, I think there's a lot of room for potential here, and you could possibly get something just as good as Durox here. Again, really just depends on how good you are with modding them. When it comes to the typing sound, overall, I think it was good. You're definitely getting a noticeably thocky keyboard, but I wasn't completely satisfied. I feel like there was a tiny hint of dullness in the switches. Now I feel like this is probably credited to the mute silicone in between the PCB and the plate, but I wasn't sure if it was either that or the switches, so I swapped them out to Gateron black inks, and here's the new typing test. Yeah, after hearing that, it got noticeably better. I guess maybe I'm not as big as a fan of Gateron yellows as I'd hoped to be. But then again, a tiny bit of me still thinks there's a tiny bit of dullness slash mutedness. Is mutedness a word? I don't know. But yeah, overall, I think the typing sound is good. There's noticeable thocks here, just not the best, in my opinion. Of course, if you really enjoyed the sound test, then no problem. Okay, now let's hop into this conclusion. Really, I only have two bad things to say about this keyboard. The first one being that thing I just talked about with the typing sound, which was a pretty small issue, to be fair, and could totally just be my ears. And the second issue is unfortunately pretty relevant, and that's that stock really isn't reliable. The only way you could have gotten this keyboard is through group buy, and that group buy is long over, or maybe a restock we saw on the first version on mechanicalkeyboards.com, but that is not confirmed. Now, luckily, there are rumors of an R3 version coming out sometime soon. I don't have much details on it, and I don't think it's confirmed, but that's the only hope you can really have right now to buy one of these, unless you go in like the aftermarket somewhere. But besides that, this keyboard is honestly very good. If you're thinking about picking one of these up and have the chance to buy one at retail pricing, I highly recommend you go for it. I think it's extremely beginner friendly and a good way to learn more about building keyboards while also still getting a good typing experience. But if you have a larger budget and already know how to build keyboards decently well, this wouldn't be my first choice. From what I've had the privilege to work on, personally, I like the GMMK Pro better, for example. I think the building process was way more frustrating on that board, but I think the end result was better. But nonetheless, I think the KBD67 Lite R2 is a good build, and I don't think you can go wrong with it. And compared to other keyboards, this is better for your wallet.